It's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Walter Bingham. Ken and Hora, Walter, you're 95 and a half, very active. I listen to you on the radio, I read articles about you. You're a patient of ours for many years, and it really is so wonderful to see you here in Jerusalem this afternoon.
Thank you.
Walter, if you could just give a bit of a background where you came from and when you were born.
Well, I was born on the 5th of January 1924, believe it or not, in Germany. That's in a city or a town called Karlsruhe, which is on the Rhine in southwest Germany, of course, not far, just across from France, more or less. And that's where I stayed until I was 15 and a half. I went to school there. We didn't have a Jewish school. It was an ordinary school where, for the first 3 years, it was before Hitler came to power. And then 3 years later, I started in 1930, so in 1933 Hitler came to power, and then everything changed. The whole atmosphere at school changed, and I no longer could play with the other boys in the playground. They would shun me, and of course they would hear it from their parents who supported Hitler, and everything changed. And that was a very tough time. My school time was very tough.
Did you grow up in an Orthodox home?
I grew up in an Orthodox home, yes, in an Orthodox Jewish home. And of course, after Hitler was in power and I went to school, it was obvious who I was, because on the Jewish holidays I didn't go to school. And so that was already a bone of contention. So I had both the national holidays and the Jewish holidays.
Before Hitler came to power in 1933, did you have a lot of non-Jewish friends?
Well, no, I was, I was up 9 years old. Hitler came to power. No, I don't remember that. They were the boys in the class, and I was just one of the boys. We kicked the ball around in the schoolyard, and I got my share.
You never had anti-Semitic incidents before?
Not before. Look, I must tell you that there was anti-Semitism always in Germany under the skin, so to speak. That was it. But I didn't suffer any anti-Semitism before Hitler came to power. After that, of course, it got worse because Jews were known to be the enemy of Germany and the ruin of Germany. So obviously the children learned that, and there were newspapers writing about it, and that was tough. That was very tough. I never got to play with this anymore with the school friends. They would shun me, and in fact they would physically hurt me. And if I went to the teacher and I'd say, "Look, teacher, what Johnny did to me," the teacher wouldn't do anything. So that, of course, was a sign that I was Hefker, so to speak, in Hebrew, that people could do with me what they liked. And that's in fact what happened. And it got worse, and the children were indoctrinated. They went to Hitler Youth, and in Hitler Youth they learned more about Jews, and in fact they were exercising like the military, because the ambition was for Greater Germany and to go to war to the east. That was obvious from the songs they were singing against the Jews. And that's a long story that could take us many hours.
Did you have other Jewish boys in your class?
There might have been one or two sometimes, or none. There were not that many Jews in that town. Had 156,000 inhabitants, with, I don't know, 3% Jews, if there are.
And you had a synagogue? You had a shul?
We had two great synagogues, like cathedrals, and two prayer rooms, were smaller prayer rooms. That was what we had, and I had to go in the evening to the religious class after school every night.
And did your parents try and shelter you, or did they try to explain to you what's going on when this was
Well,
happening?
I was old enough. You see, you grow up very fast. Under such circumstances, or I was in some respects very naive, not like the youngsters today who know everything about everything. But I grew up very fast streetwise, because I knew what was happening around me. So in that respect, I knew everything.
Did you have siblings?
Pardon?
Brothers and sisters?
I have no siblings, no.
You were only child?
I was the only child, yes. Which in some respects is good, in some respects it isn't. You'd love to have siblings. On the other hand, like my late wife, who had a sister, and the sister went where other Jews went in the Holocaust with her parents. So you never know what would have.
They were killed.
You never know what would have happened. And if you had siblings.
Walter, do you remember your neighborhood? Do you remember?
Yes, I've been there.
No, but growing up, you remember your neighbors or people?
Neighbors, no. I remember the baker shop. But neighbors, well, it's been a long time. Okay. That's 75 years, 80 years ago.
Do you remember the Nazis marching into?
Oh, we lived in the main road of the city, and had a balcony, and I saw Hitler on a couple of occasions driving by with all the pomp and everything. And I also saw both airships, the Hindenburg and the Graf Zeppelin, going overhead. So from our balcony. So I remember all those things. Individual neighbors, no. Jewish neighbors, I remember Jewish neighbors who lived in the house next door, and other Jewish people. And there's a book which is published by the city archives in Karlsruhe, listing stories and all about Jews in the city, and listing stories and listing who there was and who there isn't anymore, and so on.
Did you have any cousins or close friends during this time that you could?
Yes, we had a family. We had an extended family. I had cousins, and one of them went through camps in Italy and everywhere, and then he finally got to America. And had two sons, and then they all came here to Israel, and he, of course, is long dead, and that's my uncle, and my cousin also recently died, and he left some children here, and so I have a very large extended family. Interestingly enough, in Germany, well, I haven't been to England yet. We're coming to that. But in Germany, I had reasonable uncles and aunts and so on, and then I came to England eventually.
But Walter, can I ask, was your family many generations in Germany?
No. We were Eastern European Jews, so-called Polish Jews, and my grandparents came to Germany at the turn of the century after the pogroms in Poland, and my parents were both born in Poland, in Galicia. They were that high when they came. They were little children, and so no, we were different from the so-called German Jews. I don't want to run them down, but they thought they were better than we were. And in fact, when the crunch came with Hitler, they had the shock of their life, because we, having known about pogroms in Poland and having being very religious, knew what was happening, and the German Jews who'd been there a few generations longer, or some very long, felt that they were more German than Jewish, and they felt that nothing can happen to them, because they fought in the First World War for the fatherland and had the Iron Cross.
Yeah.
So when the crunch came, it was much harder for them
Mm-hmm.
than for us to take it.
And Walter, your German name that your parents gave you when you were born?
Well, my grandfather on my father's side was called Wolf, so they made me. I was born after he died, so I was called Wolfgang, which is a very German name.
Yeah.
Very German name, and that's what I was. And if you see any photos of me as a boy, I looked like a very clean-cut German boy. I didn't have the. I didn't have any side locks or big.
And your family name?
My family name, that's a big story. That's a big story. You see, my family name was came from Galicia, but it has, interestingly, and I don't know how it comes, that it is a proper German word also, and the German word is billig, which, if you translate it literally, means cheap. But then when people say, I know what it means, I say, no, please, inexpensive. But if you look at the Hebrew writing of it, where the B and the V could be the same letter, mm-hmm. then there's some lady living here who was called Willig, and came from the same. Her family came from the same area, and she explained to me that this was really a derivative of some name of the southern provinces of Poland, which are now in Ukraine.
Walter, can I ask, your family having fled Poland, coming to Germany, now seeing the anti-Semitism and Hitler rise to power, did they feel it's time to maybe move on, to go to safer places, to try and escape?
Absolutely. But you see, in the early years, the policy of the Nazis was not extermination of Jews, although there were some camps where the people were treated very harshly early on, together with communists and so on. But the policy was not extermination, the policy was get rid of them, get rid of them. Now, we all wanted to go, but it wasn't easy because no country would accept us. You had to have either a lot of money, very good references. If you want to go to the United States,
somebody had to sponsor.
You had to be sponsored. When you want to go to the United States, they have to make sure that you don't become a burden on the national security system, and the same in England. England was, they also didn't want to take us. In fact, what I heard, now this is what I heard, that Jewish communities in America and England said were not too enthusiastic about receiving many Jews, because they said too many Jews spreads anti-Semitism.
You know, unfortunately, I've heard it as well.
They did not encourage it sufficiently, and they didn't do enough.
Yeah. Sadly, very sad, tragically.
Tragic, yes. They didn't do enough. Yes.
Did your family ever think of coming through to Israel, to Palestine in those days?
Well, look, my wife was also a refugee girl from Austria. She was a great Anglophile. She liked England. And so eventually when I got married, and she didn't want to go, what do you do when the wife doesn't want to go?
No, but your family in Germany,
family in Germany,
was Palestine ever an option?
There was sisters of one of my grandmothers is buried in Tel Aviv. She came in 1935 with her youngest daughter. Their brother, who was fairly well off, financed that. This youngest daughter died a few years ago, her age, just one day before she was 101. In Tel Aviv, they've been here since. And then I had another aunt who also came in 1934 or 5.
There was a great amount of immigration of German Jews to mandate Palestine.
You had to have the money. And then there was the question of the British who did give the permits.
And then they had the white paper. They issued the white paper.
Yeah, it's very different. That was very different. And we, my personal family, we were poor. We were poor. My father was a printer, and so we just couldn't. And that was it. So you got stuck.
And did your family feel that it was going to blow over, that Hitler wouldn't remain in power?
Everybody knew that. Well, initially everybody thought very early that he's a crank, you know. And people, when they voted for him, even Germans thought, well, if he doesn't come up to his promises, we'll have another election. But of course that never happened.
Yeah.
And so we, as time progressed and the economic strangulation of Jewish life became tighter and tighter, then we knew that it wasn't going to get better, and you were just hoping that it wasn't going to get too bad or worse, but it did, and things developed as the world knows today.
And Walter, this is a bit difficult, but do you remember getting worse anti-Semitic incidents?
Oh yes, at school. I mean, I certainly had a tough time at school. And the interesting thing is that I was sitting next to a German boy, you know, 2 by 2, and he used to copy from me. And he got good marks and I got bad marks, simply because the Jews couldn't possibly know anything better than the German boy. And eventually they said, no, you can't sit next to an Aryan boy anymore. You have to go to the back of the class. So I sat at the back of the class. The moment I was segregated, of course, was a sign to all the other pupils that I was absolutely different from them, and they could do with me what they liked. And they did.
Were you the only Jew in your class?
Well, I don't remember. Sometimes there were 2.
Okay.
But I mostly was on my own.
And were you allowed to attend the school, or did
I had to attend school, yes.
Because
that was the law.
You had to attend school.
By law, I had to go 8 years to a school, and then I sat in the back, and when I raised my finger in order to answer a question, the teacher, I was never called anymore. I may have been wrong, but just in case the Jew was right.
Wow.
That couldn't be.
That must have been very difficult.
That was very difficult, and that was sort of my school years. And then, of course, later on, they decided that they could no longer. I make a joke. They said they could no longer allow the Germans to breathe in the air in the schoolroom that the Jew breathes out. So I was kicked out.
You were kicked out of
school, yes. And but not only I, but all the teaching personnel, Jewish teaching personnel, from the highest professors to the lowest help teachers, and they shot themselves in the foot. I mean, the whole academic, a lot of Jewish academics were thrown out. And so for some time there was no school, and then the Jewish community begged the school authorities in my town, couldn't they give us a school? And eventually they decided, okay, and they gave us the oldest dilapidated old building that was in town, which has now been pulled down. But even so, that building was half occupied by children who needed remedial teaching, so that the Germans didn't count them as good
areas.
They were not good enough for making the pure race. They had to be segregated. Still, we were the Jews, and we were segregated from them. After all, they were Germans. And so there we were going to school eventually, and why I said they shot themselves in the foot is because the Jewish school authority Jewish school the community had the choice of the best teachers in the whole country. So we had the finest professors for that part of the last part of the schooling. We had a curriculum which was higher than the highest high school. I mean, we did bookkeeping and God knows what, everything. Chemistry, physics, and that was only a basic school, just an ordinary, what you call public school in America. Public school, of course, in England is something quite different. That's high school, Eton, and all those places. But anyway, that was, and then eventually I finished the schooling, and I can go on and on.
And Walter, were you ever physically attacked in the streets by any Germans?
Not in the street, no. Not in the street. Only my school, the pupils, the people in my classes, sort of attacked me and called me names. And the bullying that you know today that goes on in some schools is nothing compared to what we Jewish boys had to suffer at school. And there was no remedy, no punishment for the perpetrators. Because they were Nazis, and they were. If you can reach over there, that green package. The German children, had of course to go to Hitler Youth every night. That was a must, and especially if your parents were working for the state or the government or some companies, and if they wouldn't send their children to the Hitler Youth, they would lose their job.
It was compulsory.
Yeah. Well. It subsequently became compulsory, but they would do that. And so, and there at the Hitler Youth, they had to go after school into uniforms, and the Hitler Youth uniforms were like a military rank structure, absolutely, because they looked towards making war and bringing these people up in a disciplined way. Oh, and there were many paramilitary organizations. I mean, I'm coming far too far away from your subject you want. The paramilitary organizations, of which you probably know one, the SS, but then there were a dozen others. National Socialist Drivers Corps, National Socialist Flyers Corps, and they were all there being trained, militarily trained, and they had uniforms in military rank structure, because the Germans under the Peace Treaty of Versailles in 1918 were not allowed to have more than 100,000 men under arms, and of course that meant with 100,000 men you can't make a war against the Russians and so on. So they were all trained. That was getting around the law, getting around the Peace Treaty, and each one of them had a honorary dagger. All these organizations had a dagger, including the Hitler Youth. That's the Hitler Youth dagger.
Wow.
Now they carried that. It even has a thing here, you know.
It's a proper dagger. Wow.
It's a proper dagger, which they carried, and on the blade is engraved in German, Blut und Ehre, blood and honor. Now, you can, if you like to explain it, I don't know what you would think, but I tell you what I think it means.
Okay.
It means the more blood you make with it, the more honor you have. And when I say blood, I mean Jewish blood. How do I know that? Because in the evening, when the Hitler Youth from my class and others were marching in their uniforms up and down the street, they were singing songs like, "When Jewish blood spurts from the knife, everything goes much better." So blood, Jewish blood.
Wow.
And that was what I had to listen to. you're really taking me a long way away.
How did you get this dagger?
Well, that's through my army service. In the army, apart from after fighting, I was transferred. I was in counterintelligence, and I did a lot of other things.
Walter, do you remember the Crystal Nacht, the fake?
Yes, absolutely, I remember it. Absolutely, I remember it.
Could you just describe what happened?
Well, I was after I'd finished my schooling. My parents found out that in another school, in another town, 60 kilometers north, there was a 9th year of schooling for local Jewish children, But they managed to get me in, and I went to this town, and I lived, because we were kosher, and the only kosher place was the orphanage, so I lived in the orphanage, and went to school every day, to that class, which was behind the synagogue. And one day I walked there and I saw a big commotion, more and more and more, and I got there and there was a synagogue in flames. And the interesting thing was that the German fire service was there, but not to douse the flames of the synagogue, but to cool down neighboring property.
To make sure that it wouldn't spread.
I saw that.
And in your town, the two synagogues?
They were also destroyed, yes. And one synagogue, there was a dangerous structure left, a wall on one of the synagogues. And to add insult to injury, the Jewish community had to pay for for pulling it down.
When this happened,
don't take me too far away.
Walter, when this happened,
I have to go to work.
When this happened, did the Jewish community really realize that there's no?
Well, that was This
was the turning point.
That was the Kristallnacht. That was the biggest pogrom before the actual Holocaust. Yeah. That was the biggest thing where they on that night they arrested 30,000 Jews, took them to concentration camps, and destroyed a lot of Jewish property and all this and all that.
And then I know that you were part of the Kindertransport. Can you just mention how did this happen?
Well, what happened after Kristallnacht was that the Jewish communities in Germany contacted the Jewish charitable organizations in England and said, can you not take our children? And that all had to do with the British government, and then somehow an arrangement was made that Britain would accept 10,000 children, mostly Jewish, some might have been from communist parents. And that was the beginning of the Kindertransport, which lasted from maybe the end of December when it started. I mean, it had to start very quickly, or maybe beginning of January, until the outbreak of war, which was 8 months. In these 8 months, Kindertransport was a collective name, and many organizations had an input. Some children went to foster parents, and some children went to family, and some went into hostels. Some were very small and very, very tiny, and then in the hostels British people came and chose them like you choose your dog in a stray dog's home. The Kindertransport was a very traumatic thing. I was older, I was 15 and a half, so obviously having gone through all that, I knew what was happening. But then there were 4-year-olds. And the parents brought the children to the train. They were the heroes. They brought their children to the train, put them on the train. Now imagine a 4-year-old. Mommy, why are you leaving me? The mommy's outside and the child's in the train. And it's traumatic. Absolutely traumatic. And that little 4-year-old might have been with a 9-year-old sibling. Don't know.
Somewhere alone as well.
But they were alone as well. Maybe even 3 and being cared for by people who cared for the children. As far as people, the ceiling was 16, so I was 15 and a half. As far as I was concerned, it was a sad, very sad, but it was mixed with a sense of adventure. You're going in a big international train and you're going to another country, and and sadness when you wave goodbye to your mother who took me to the train.
Did your parents discuss with you, did they give you the option if you wanted to go, or did they advise you that you should go?
No, I don't remember that. My father was not there anymore. He'd already been deported to Poland before that. But my mother took me to the train. I was chosen. There was someone in my town who chose who should go and who shouldn't, played God. And I didn't know why I was chosen and not my cousins. So, luck of the draw, I suppose. And then I went, and I actually, you have a ticket, and we went on the train, and then on a night, and then to Holland, and on the border of Holland, the Nazi control came in for the last time, and then after that we crossed the border, and we were told we're free now. And then we went on a night boat from Hoek van Holland to Harwich in England. And I do remember, I want to tell you that, I do remember that we had a breakfast. I suppose I spoke German. And I'd never seen pure white sliced bread before. I mean, we had dark bread there, it was nearly war. Incidentally, I'll come to that in a minute. So I'd never seen this bread before, and when they served us breakfast on the boat, I remember distinctly saying in German, "Excuse me, I don't eat cake for breakfast."
Wow.
Now my mother, who brought me to the train, and that was 1 month before war broke out. So it was not, life for Jews was never good for years, and it was obvious that war was coming. That was a given. Everybody knew this was now war. And there you are, your parents behind. They were heroes. Your parents were left behind, send their children off. And 99.9% of all the children never ever saw their parents again, because all the parents went where Jews were taken to, the Holocaust. I was one of them, very fortunate, very, very fortunate, who after all of it, I was reunited with my mother, who went through the camps and survived. So that was the Kindertransport, and I was taken, I was in a group taken to, because I was in a religious Zionist youth movement. I had Zionism with a mother's milk, so to speak. And I was taken to a Zionist communal settlement, rather like a kibbutz in England, where I stayed for some years. It was run on a real old socialist kibbutz principles. If your pants were broken, you would go to the store and get another pair.
Where was the kibbutz?
That was in Wales.
In Wales.
In Wales, yes. And that was the story of the Kindertransport.
When you said goodbye to your mother, I mean, when your mother brought you to the train station and you had to say goodbye, that must have been one of the most traumatic.
Yes, it was very traumatic, because you were hoping, but you didn't know that war would break out. And when we were in this place, one day, one of the main leaders came from London, and we were all assembled outside, and he said war had broken out, and it'll be a very long time till you see your parents again. You were hoping.
And Walter, did your mother, was she able to send you letters? Could you correspond?
Initially you could correspond, and then you could correspond via the United States, which was not in the war. So neither Britain, neither Germany, Germany was not at war with the United States. Mm-hmm. And so you could write to the United States from Germany. and then you could get.
Did you used to receive letters from your mother?
I did get some, and I got.
And you would write to her as well?
There was not a lot. It was very difficult, but you could be initially. You could have a little bit of contact, but that soon died. That soon died out.
And with your father,
My father, I had yet, because when he got to Poland, Poland was not yet at war with the Germans. I did get some correspondence. I did get, and the last letter came back, sorry. And that was all censored. Everything was opened and read by the censor.
And Walter, do you know what happened to your father?
Yes, he perished in the Warsaw Ghetto. He was murdered, he was killed.
In the Warsaw Ghetto.
That's it.
Can I just ask you, because it's just amazing.
I don't want to go too far.
I know, Walter,
in
the kibbutz, did you have friends? Were you happy there? Was it?
Well, I lived there, and we initially I had no choice, of course, and it was okay. I was a Zionist, and it was a Zionist establishment, and every week we had the head. Not teacher, madrich, what do you call it? The head.
Leader.
The head leader would give a press conference. He would tell us what's going on in the world.
How many children were in the kibbutz?
About 180.
And Walter, can I ask, on the train or when you went on the boat, do you remember that you had madrichim?
There were leaders with us, of course.
But they say that if they were over the age of 16, they were actually turned back and they had to go back to Germany.
No, that I don't know. I don't know. That I don't know.
Okay.
That I don't. I don't think so. That I don't know. There were leaders from all kinds of organizations. I mean, they were not all Zionist leaders. We were just a fraction of them. These transports went every week. Probably the Jewish organizations rented part of a train carriage or something like that in the international trains.
And when you were in Wales, there's not a very big Jewish community, but were you ever part of the Jewish community in Wales?
We were totally separate. We were our own community somewhere in North Wales.
And you never had contact with the Jewish community, or?
No, we didn't.
Did you have any relatives in England?
Nobody. I had nobody. No.
Lastly,
in fact, I had nobody. Eventually, when I got married, the only relatives I had was my wife and one daughter that I had, and that was my family in England. No other family. When I came to Israel, I suddenly found I had a large extended family.
Walter, I can't leave you without asking if you could just mention your reunion with your mother after the war.
Well, that was the most emotional moment of my life. I was at that time a British soldier, because I was 4 years in the British Army, and I was stationed in Hamburg. And my mother was saved through Count Volker Bernadotte, who unfortunately was shot here by one of our paramilitary organizations, and that was a very sad story. This Volker Bernadotte saved several thousand Jews. You see a white bus if you go to the exhibition. If you go to the
because with the ambulances.
Yad Vashem, you see a white bus in the open with red crosses where some people were saved. Anyway, that's another long story. However, my mother was saved through Count Volker Bernadotte, the Swedish Red Cross, and this man unfortunately was shot here because he was sent back subsequently from Sweden as an emissary of the. Some emissary, and he came here and he had some proposals about Jerusalem which were not palatable to us, and he got shot. They didn't weigh up that that was only talk here, like they all come here to talk, and there he actually saved thousands of Jews. It's a sad story. Now, when my mother was in Sweden, And I had a colleague from the army who had a brother in Copenhagen in Denmark. She was in southern Sweden, the infamous place of Malmö today. And this friend of mine from the army had a brother in Copenhagen. He arranged that my mother could come over, that I would have leave. I got leave from the army, furlough you call it or something. And then I met my mother in Copenhagen for the first time. After 6 years. Now you have to imagine, she left this 15-year-old fairly naive boy, and she got back a 22-year-old experienced soldier.
And that reunion must have been...
There were 6 years that were missing.
And it must have been the most emotional moment of your life.
That was a very, well, you can imagine.
You can imagine.
Very, very emotional.
When did you know that your mother had survived the war?
Well, we got that through Red Cross, through relatives, and she knew how to get in touch with relatives in America who sent food parcels to her and so on. And I knew that, and somehow there was the Red Cross was also involved, and we found out.
So you were that very small percentage, the minute
very,
percentage
very small percentage.
That were reunited with your parents.
Very, very small percentages. We saw at least one parent. And you ask anybody from the Kindertransport, and they'll went alone. I have a problem with the British. Now, I'm very grateful. They saved my life, and I was in the British Army. I got decorated by the King and God knows what. And I did my best in the army, but I have a grudge because of this unaccompanied children law. Unaccompanied children, they would... unbelievable.
It was the law, if you were over 16, you weren't allowed to...
No, unaccompanied by parents. I'm talking about unaccompanied. All the children that came, they had permits for 10,000. I don't think all 10,000 made it because war broke out. I think less than that actually made it, but no parents. So all these children came without parents, all sorts of ages, from the little ones.
It's exceptionally difficult. There is gratitude that they accepted, but a lot of the children...
I have a grudge against the British. I did. I mean, I really did. I lived. I was grateful I was alive. British. I subsequently was a British soldier. 4 years I landed on the beaches of Normandy. So I did my bit. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. You know, and I did it well because I have some high bravery decorations. But that didn't alter the fact that I was upset. The trauma of being by yourself.
Separated, that separation.
And just that should be the end. They had just 2 months ago decided that to compensate that trauma, the Germans. Now, only about 1,000 are estimated to be left of the so-called 10,000. So they waited a long time, and they decided to compensate us for the trauma, and they insulted us with 2,500 euros.
A one payment. Walter, have you been involved in Kindertransport reunions? And have
once
you
in
attended?
England, yes. Once in England, I didn't bother much.
You don't have a close connection with other Kindertransport?
No, I knew people who came to England. Yeah, of course, who knew. Well, I was with them at the time, and I knew some that came to Israel subsequently. I was from that place in England. I was sent to another smaller place, Zionist center, and they were a little older than I was, and they all came to Israel, and they started Kibbutz Lavi. So all my colleagues started Kibbutz Lavi. So I knew some of those, and some then lived here in Jerusalem and other places, and most of them unfortunately have gone to another place.
But you still kept a close connection with...
Until then, I had a few friends, yes. I know their children, I know their sons. I go to a place and I know one of the sons of one of the boys who came with me.
Well, Walter, you are an inspiration. I just want to personally, I would like to just thank you so much. Walter, really, thank you very much.
It's a great...
Walter, you are an inspiration for all of us. Somebody we can all strive to emulate. What you've gone through, and you smile, and you are so articulate. You're amazing.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you.
May you just at Mayvestream in good health.
That's too quick. Mayvestream, that means 120.
Plus mine, plus VAT, plus...
plus VAT, I see. Because you see, the 9/11 in America was 17 years ago, and for me that's like yesterday.
Sure.
So what's another few years?
Plus mine, plus even more mine, double mine, triple mine.
Right.
And may you have all of Hashem's blessings, and I can't thank you enough, Walter. You are really an inspiration.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Walter, in your beautiful home in Jerusalem, and you have got these incredible photos that Baruch Hashem survived the Shoah, survived the Holocaust.
Yes. Well, I have my grandparents on my father's side here. Interesting, this sheitel is very interesting. Today they have these modern sheitels. These are just 3 pieces of hair, one about that size, and you put one on that side and with a pin, and one in the middle and one here.
So your grandparents were very fromm, they were very religious.
Very simple, yeah. And this is my grandparents on my mother's side. They were a little bit more modern, but still also religious.
And they were all in Germany?
They were all in Germany. I didn't know, I knew him, but I was named after this grandfather. He was Wolf, and I was named after him. And then you have here the same, the mother side here. This lady is this lady here, and this is my mother.
That's your mother.
And this young girl, that she died in Israel, age 101. And then I'm a little boy here with my parents in Germany.
And this is your father?
My father, yeah.
And how old were you in this picture?
Well, this picture, if you look at this picture closely, you see that the collar of his shirt is miles too large, because that was taken in Warsaw in the ghetto, and so he was already shrunk here. That's why the collar. You see it?
I can see it, yeah.
So that's
how old were you in this picture with your parents?
Here?
Yeah.
Oh, about 3 or 4, I suppose.
And in which?
1927. That was.
1927.
That was 93. So I say 3.5. That was 1927.
And Walter, in which town in Germany?
In Karlsruhe. No, sorry, in Baden-Baden.
Baden-Baden.
Which is a spa near my town of birth.
And how old are you in this picture?
In this here?
Yeah.
Well, 1927, 3.5. I was born in January 24.
And on top is a picture.
On top is the family of my father. So you see my father, myself in the middle, my mother, the tall one.
So you right in the very top.
The big, with a cap, with another cap like that, yeah. And some of them are not. None of them. Oh, this one is this one here. She's the only one alive, and me.
And Walter, how did these pictures survive?
Well, my aunt, who came to Israel in 1935, had quite a few of them.
So I think your parents had sent it, or she took it when she came.
She had pictures, yes, and then you had an uncle, and so somehow they survived.
It's amazing because this is the only.
Through my aunt, a lot of it through my aunt, who was living here, because this grandmother and this one, she's buried in Tel Aviv. She came here in 1935, and with this one, and so they lived here.
And you kept a close connection.
1935, yeah, and when we came here, she died only a few years ago. The little one, just one day before she was 101, and she lived in Tel Aviv. And my daughter, since we were here, my daughter looked after her, and then she went into a home, and we looked after her.
And I think, Walter, in the Kindertransport, when the war finished, your mother came.
No. My mother was in the camps.
But after the war.
And after the war, she was saved by the event that Count Volker Bernadotte with the white buses that picked. You see a white bus in Yad Vashem. They picked up different people, and she was fortunate to be picked up and went to Sweden. And she lived in Sweden until the rest of her life. And, with her own group. She was with a whole group that came from Riga, from the labor camps in the east, all the way together. They came until they got to Sweden.
And you got to see her, obviously, after.
And we reunited.
You reunited?
We reunited in Copenhagen, because I was a soldier in Hamburg at the time. And she lived in the south of Sweden, which was very close. So we made some arrangements to a friend to meet in a house in Copenhagen.
And how many years were you separated during the war?
From 39, 6 years or more. So she actually left me more. Wait a minute, I was 50 and a half, and I met her again when I was an experienced soldier. I was 23 or so.
And you couldn't see her straight after the war?
Sure. No, that was difficult. So the interesting thing is she left me as a fairly naive 15-and-a-half-year-old and met me as an experienced soldier who's been in the battles in many years later. That was a very big.
But you did see her when you were 15 and a half?
50. Well, she took me to the train.
Yeah.
She took me to the train. They were the parents who were the heroes. They took their children 5 minutes before war broke out.
And then you went on the Kindertransport.
And then on this Kindertransport. And I'm one of the minute number who ever saw any of their parents again. All the other parents, they sent the children off, and all the other parents perished.
And your father?
My father was deported before that to Poland. He got to the Polish border that's a very long story.
I know, but your father,
and he didn't survive. He died in the Warsaw Ghetto.
And how did they do this picture? It's amazing that they did this picture in the Warsaw Ghetto.
Look, the ghetto had they were trading there. People were trading, shoemakers they were besides the very small rations they got. They got some of the food parcels got through, and there were people who did this in the ghetto at the time. That was possible. There was life in the ghetto. People traded, and some couldn't, but some traded whatever they had, and some brought maybe a camera there.
It's amazing.
So that was.
So you come from Walter. You come from quite a very distinguished and a very religious family.
Yes. We were. They were very. I was brought up that way.
And Walter,
this grandmother wanted me to become a rabbi. I know. I was destined to go to a place called Würzburg, which was a teacher's seminary and rabbi seminary, but I never made it.
But you always remained religious.
Well,
committed.
I got off the derech at times, and certainly in the army, and afterwards. But now I'm back. I'm here.
And your faith in Hashem, you always...
Pardon?
Your faith in Hashem, your emunah?
Well, yes. Look, my education is in the philosophical field, philosophy. I have a first degree in politics and philosophy, and a postgraduate in political philosophy. So, as a philosopher, you want to inquire and you doubt, and I'm a tormented soul. I have difficulty because I keep asking and I don't have the answers.
But
But in the meantime, I'm collecting brownie points.
But you wear a kippah.
I wear a kippah, and I have a 200% kosher home. My daughter is a Chabadnik. So.
And Walter, let me just ask, what message do you give to your grandchildren or to the future generation?
Sorry, what?
What message do you impart?
Message? Trust in God and come to Israel. Live in Israel. The rest of the world will turns more and more against us.
And you witnessed it. You've lived it.
I lived it, and I could see that today we're living in the 1930s.
You can see some
it's not going to finish like in the 1930s because we have the State of Israel. But we are living in the 1930s in the rest of Europe and America and other parts of the world. And it's not a life for Jews. It's not a life of quality.
You see the resurgence of anti-Semitism?
Yeah, absolutely. And in due course, Jews will have to do what the white population did in South Africa, live behind closed gates and security cameras. That we have to.
Or they can come to Israel.
Or they can come to Israel. This is the place. Israel is the place. They will wake up eventually. It hasn't affected all of them. I have family. I have a grandson there, and it hasn't affected him as yet. But living in a bubble, and that bubble is going to burst eventually.
Well, Walter, thank you so much. This is really absolutely unbelievable, and it's amazing that Baruch Hashem.
Yeah, okay.
And you should just, Walter, and you're now 97 years young.
I'm 97 and 5 months. You know, the 5 months are very important. They're like with little children, that counts. You know, so really, if I want to appear very old, I say I'm in my 98th year.
Sure. I once said to you, Me'evesrim, and you said, but why only...
Me'evesrim is too quick. That's machar.
That's right.
Tomorrow. Look, it was nearly 20 years ago that the Twin Towers were
It's so true.
bombed,
it goes so
and
quick.
it's like yesterday. So what's another 20 years? Nothing. Where I daven, where I go to for the religious, for the Shabbat services and so on, they say at Me'evesmonim, that's 180, and I said, okay, I'll accept that, and when we get there, we'll talk again.
It's wonderful. So Walter, I just want to thank you. It's been, wow, such a pleasure and an honor to be with you. And really, I just wish you all the mazel and bracha.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And
You didn't talk about my wife.
If you want to, Walter. How many years were you married?
40. Here.
40 years.
This is the last year of my last birthday of my wife. And before in September, and 3 months later, she died.
Wow.
It was a birthday present she looked at.
Walter, thank you so very much.
Okay.